All of Hollywood's eyes seemed to be on the studio that day. I was there, quietly walking through the long, narrow corridors of that old studio. The moment Frankie, that is Frank Sinatra, stepped through the set's door, the entire atmosphere shifted. Eyes locked onto him, a sudden hush fell, and then whispers began to ripple through the room. "Here he is, Frankie. Looks like he's going to charm someone again." Such murmurs echoed softly in the backstage. Back then, Hollywood was all about glittering lights and glamorous sets, the stuff of dreams. But behind the scenes, a very different world existed. Seeing Frank up close was nothing like watching him on stage. His voice held a spellbinding power, his smile carried charm, and his presence could make anyone nearby feel small for just a moment. That day, we, a few of the backstage crew, were talking quietly about the rumor of a secret closeness between Frank and a certain young starlet. Of course, names were whispered cautiously. Backstage gossip was sharp but hushed. Frank Sinatra was already a young superstar at the time. His fame was skyrocketing. His concerts were packed, and female fans nearly went wild with excitement. But we weren't just seeing him perform. We were observing the intertwining of human nature, desire, and small secrets unfolding in real time. And on that day, a whisper of a romantic rumor began to bloom backstage that I noticed the young actress sitting quietly in a corner. I won't use her real name because the story is meant to feel true, but some details are fictional. Frank's eyes found hers, a small smile, a subtle glance, and the entire backstage seemed to freeze. That look was not a casual friendly greeting. Nobody fully understood it, but we, a few who worked there closely, knew this was far from a simple stage handshake. Whispers grew louder as everyone backstage stole glances at each other. "Who is he with?" someone asked. Another quietly nodded, stifling a smile. Gossip is always a mix of truth and imagination. In this case, there was both. I stood near Frank, and for a brief moment, our eyes met. He gave me a slight smile. That smile was more human, more intimate than the dazzling stage smile everyone knew. Yet it was also dangerous because it could capture everyone's attention in an instant. Frank moved through the set with charisma. Cameras followed him, while we backstage could only watch the whispers. A casual glance, a quiet word, or a smile could fuel the rumor mill. I was just beginning to understand Sinatra's backstage world and the storms of fame that followed him. On the one hand, the press and gossip could be merciless. On the other, Frank's way of handling it made him even more captivating in the eyes of all who admired him. This secret love story was another glimpse behind Hollywood's sparkling facade. The other crew members had noticed it too. Every glance, every quiet laugh, every hushed word passed the story along. Watching Frankie, I felt a strange thrill of simply being a witness. I realized he wasn't just a star. He was human, with desires and flaws like anyone else. Every movement backstage that day, every look could become fodder for gossip. But Frank's presence showed that he was in control. Everyone seemed captivated by this small drama unfolding around him. And I, the unknown witness, silently recorded the moment in my memory. I knew that in a few days, this little rumor would reach the pages of Hollywood magazines, and everyone would be talking about it. The whispers, the quiet smiles, Frank's charisma, and the actress's subtle glances. Together, they made the backstage feel like a stage itself, only without cameras. Just eyes, ears, and gossip. I, as the unseen observer, watched this secret affair and could share it with you, seeing it up close as it happened. The atmosphere that day captured the glamour and mystery of 1950s Hollywood. Seeing Frank, not just on stage, but behind the curtain, reminded us of the allure and dangers of the gossip-filled world. The day had begun quietly enough, with only the usual background hum of cameras and crew chatter. But in Hollywood, nothing ever stays quiet for long when Frank Sinatra is around. Backstage, what started as small, tentative whispers soon swelled into something more intense. "Did you see them together?" one crew member asked, lowering their voice just enough to avoid drawing attention. Another nodded, whispering, "I think they might be meeting in secret." The air in the studio felt charged, like electricity crackling before a storm. And I, standing in a shadowed corner, watched every subtle exchange, every glance, as if I were witnessing a small but inevitable explosion. Frankie moved through the set with that effortless charm that made the women sigh and the men respect him. Yet, there was a subtle tension in his posture that day, an almost imperceptible quickening in his step when he approached the young actress who had captured his attention. She sat quietly at the side of the set, pretending to check her script, but her eyes betrayed her nerves. A faint smile flickered across her face when Frank caught her glance, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink around them. That tiny exchange was enough to send the rumor mill spinning at full speed. Every crew member on that set seemed acutely aware of what was happening. A frown, a nod, a whispered question. Each became a piece of the story that no one wanted to say aloud, yet everyone wanted to know. Fingers pointed subtly, and eyes darted like they were searching for proof. Some of the junior assistants giggled nervously when they thought no one was looking, while older crew members exchanged knowing glances. They had seen Hollywood secrets before, but there was something about Frank and this young actress that made the tension particularly delicious. By late morning, it was no longer just whispers. A few observant crew members noticed Frank and the actress slipping away from the main set for a short break. They returned minutes later, faces carefully composed, but the subtle energy between them was unmistakable. "They're definitely meeting in secret," someone muttered under their breath, eyes wide with excitement. And just like that, the rumor took on a life of its own, spreading through the backstage faster than anyone could have anticipated. Frank, always aware of every eye and ear in his vicinity, maintained his calm, his signature charm never faltering. He shook hands, exchanged polite words, and smiled in that way that could disarm anyone suspicious. But beneath the effortless exterior, I could see him calculating, measuring every gesture. One wrong move, one glance too long, and the story would leap from whispers into full-blown scandal. That day, the stakes were higher than usual, and everyone around him knew it. The young actress, meanwhile, did her best to maintain composure. She fidgeted with the edge of her script, occasionally brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes kept finding Frank's, and each time, a small, almost imperceptible smile passed between them. But every movement was observed. Every subtle gesture risked turning private amusement into public spectacle. For a moment, I felt the weight of the entire studio pressing down on them, even though they were only a few steps away from the cameras. By early afternoon, even the lighting technicians and prop assistants could not avoid noticing the pair. Quiet whispers had become more confident statements. "Did you see them by the wardrobe?" someone asked, leaning closer to a friend. I heard they were laughing together for nearly 10 minutes without anyone else noticing. Each comment was like fuel for the gossip fire, and the fire was spreading rapidly. Photographers, always lurking near the edges of the set, seemed poised to capture the moment if given the slightest opportunity. Frank handled it all with the poise that had made him a legend. He understood the delicate balance between charm and discretion. He moved with purpose, guiding the actress subtly, ensuring that she remained shielded from prying eyes. A hand on the small of her back, a guiding nod, a brief word of reassurance whispered just for her. Each gesture perfectly calculated. To an outside observer, it looked effortless, natural even, but I knew the immense control required to maintain that balance. One misstep, and Hollywood's gossip mill would devour them both. Meanwhile, the crew's curiosity continued to mount. Conversations became louder, though still hushed enough to seem accidental. "Where did they go during lunch?" one asked. "I saw him glance over at her script earlier," whispered another. Even the studio security, usually detached and professional, exchanged knowing looks as if silently acknowledging that this small secret had become the hottest topic of the day. And all the while, Frank's charm acted like a shield, deflecting any unwanted attention, while the young actress leaned subtly into his presence, comforted by the quiet confidence he radiated. It was fascinating to watch the delicate dance of human curiosity and desire play out. The tiniest actions became monumental. A shared laugh, a whispered word, a casual glance. Each carried weight far beyond what it would have in normal circumstances. The gossip circulated like wildfire, yet Frank controlled the narrative without saying a word, simply through presence, posture, and expression. By late afternoon, the tension had reached its peak. The whispers had grown louder, carrying through the hallways and even touching those who weren't directly involved. Every eye seemed to follow them. And yet, Frank remained composed. He guided the actress with a gentle hand, a quiet nod, always aware of the cameras, the crew, and the rumor-hungry observers. In that moment, it became clear that backstage was its own stage, one filled with intrigue, strategy, and unspoken rules. I remember thinking how different this world was from the one on stage. On stage, Frank was untouchable, commanding adoration and applause. Backstage, he was human, vulnerable even, though still masterful in navigating the minefield of gossip, desire, and secrecy. The young actress, nervous yet poised, added to the intensity. Watching them together, I could feel the electricity in the air, the thrill of being close to something forbidden and fascinating. By the evening, it seemed that everyone had a theory, a story, or a whispered observation to share. Yet despite the chaos, Frank remained untouchable, as if the entire storm of curiosity and speculation were merely background noise. Every move, every glance, every subtle interaction had been orchestrated with precision. And when the day finally ended, the whispers continued long after the cameras had gone dark. The gossip had peaked, yes, but the real story, the elegance, the charm, and the secretive allure of Frank Sinatra remained intact. That day, backstage, I witnessed something rare. I saw the delicate interplay between fame, desire, and secrecy. I saw a man who could control the narrative without uttering a single word. And most importantly, I saw why people loved Frank Sinatra, not just for the music, not just for the films, but for the man who moved through Hollywood with confidence, mystery, and a certain untouchable grace. The gossip reached its peak, but Frank remained the same. Charming, calculating, and entirely in control, a true legend behind the velvet curtain of Hollywood. The sun had begun to set over the Hollywood Hills, casting long shadows across the studio lot. The day's excitement had started to settle, but the echoes of whispers still lingered in the hallways. The rumor of Frank Sinatra and the young actress had spread through the studio, and although it had not yet reached the front pages of every magazine, it had certainly planted seeds that would sprout quickly. And I, as always, stood quietly in the background, observing every reaction, every subtle gesture that hinted at how the aftermath would unfold. Backstage, the mood was a mix of exhilaration and caution. Crew members exchanged glances as if to say, "We saw that. Did anyone else notice?" Some whispered excitedly about the possibility of photographs surfacing, while others speculated on what Frank's next move would be. I could see the young actress sitting quietly, her hands clasped together, tried to appear composed, but there was no hiding the faint blush that colored her cheeks. It was the kind of moment that Hollywood thrives on, both dramatic and intimate, public yet private, a delicate balance that few ever navigate successfully. Frank, of course, maintained his composure. He had a way of moving through the aftermath of gossip with effortless grace. He greeted colleagues with his signature smile, nodded politely to those who dared to speculate openly, and offered the young actress small, reassuring gestures. A subtle touch on the shoulder, a quiet word of encouragement, a shared glance that conveyed understanding. All these tiny actions spoke volumes without saying a single word. To outsiders, it seemed almost natural, but behind those polished movements was an intricate dance of control, ensuring that the story did not spin out of his grasp at BY evening. The rumor had begun to take on a life of its own. A few of the more daring journalists had caught wind of the backstage drama, and although no photographs had been published, the gossip had reached other sets and even a handful of magazine editors. I remember overhearing one of them muttering, "If we get proof, this could sell like wildfire." But Frank's careful navigation of the day had prevented any concrete evidence from emerging. He had mastered the art of keeping intrigue alive while avoiding scandal that could tarnish his reputation. The young actress, initially nervous, seemed to grow more confident as the evening wore on. Frank's presence was a shield, offering both protection and assurance. She smiled more openly now, laughed softly at a joke he whispered in her ear, and the tension between them eased just slightly. Yet the air remained charged with speculation. Those of us who were close enough to witness it could feel the weight of the studio's collective curiosity pressing down on every movement. Every glance was noted, every gesture analyzed, and every small interaction potentially magnified into a story. For me, watching Frank handle the aftermath was a lesson in charisma and composure. On stage, he was magnetic, commanding attention effortlessly. Offstage, behind the glitter and the lights, he demonstrated a different kind of mastery, the ability to control the narrative, manage rumors, and protect the delicate threads of a private moment. It was an art form in itself, one that few could replicate, and it was a large part of why people were drawn to him, both then and for decades afterward. Later, as the studio emptied and the lights dimmed, the gossip began to settle into the corners of conversation. Crew members whispered about the day's events with a sense of wonder and amusement. "Did you see how he handled it?" one asked. "Unbelievable," replied another. "Not a single slip, not a single hint of panic." And they were right. Frank had turned a potentially explosive situation into a private, controlled spectacle, leaving the world to speculate but never providing a full story. Even after the cameras were turned off and the set fell silent, I could feel the story's lingering presence. Hollywood had seen many romances, many rumors, and many small dramas unfold. But there was something different about the way Frank carried himself. He did not merely survive the gossip. He elevated it, transforming whispers into legend without ever losing his poise. The young actress, though nervous at first, seemed to understand this instinctively, and I could see a quiet relief in her eyes as she realized she could trust him to navigate the day's delicate tensions by the time night fully settled over Los Angeles. I walked away from the set feeling both awe and admiration. I had witnessed a small but unforgettable piece of Hollywood history. The gossip had peaked, yes, but it had not consumed the man at the center of it. Frank Sinatra remained the same, charming, commanding, and untouchable. He had demonstrated, once again, why his legend would endure long after the bright lights dimmed and the cameras moved on. Looking back, that single day backstage encapsulated everything that made Frank Sinatra not just a star, but a myth. The stage performances, the concerts, the recordings, they were all remarkable, but it was these quiet, calculated moments behind the scenes that revealed the true man. His ability to manage desire, speculation, and human curiosity, all while maintaining his dignity and protecting those around him, was nothing short of remarkable. Hollywood, with all its glitz and glamour, often thrives on chaos and drama. But Frank taught us that it is possible to walk through the fire of rumor with grace. The whispers would continue to circulate, the magazine pages would fill with speculation, and the story of that small backstage romance would become part of the fabric of Hollywood legend. Yet he would remain untouched, a man who could charm, control, and captivate all at once. And as I left the studio that night, I knew I had been a witness to something rare. Not just a secret romance, not just gossip at its peak, but a glimpse into the way Frank Sinatra operated behind the scenes. In that fleeting, magical moment, I saw the intersection of human desire, fame, and discretion, and it was unforgettable. For anyone who had followed him on stage, it was a reminder that the man behind the music and films was just as extraordinary in private as he was in public.